What's happening? What's good? What's going on? Part of my presence YouTube channel. Look, I want to talk about this story regarding Bob Lee. Now, if you're not familiar with the name, then you know him based on the apps that he has produced. One of them, the most popular one, being the Cash App. He is the creator of the Cash App. He's also somebody who was a part of the Square platform, right? That they use for financial transactions. He was also one of the, not the creators, but he was one of the core developers of the Android operating system. Okay, so this guy is a major player in the tech world. And unfortunately, the reason why his name is trending is because he was stabbed to death in San Francisco about a week ago. So what makes this pretty interesting is the fact that this is all happening on the backdrop of a bigger issue regarding the crime in California in general. Now, a lot of people have been taking the politicians to task. They've been accusing the Democrats for being soft on crime. The fact that a lot of these criminals are repeat offenders who are only being let out to commit even more crime and wreak havoc on the neighborhoods within California. Now, what makes this even more interesting is the fact that Bob Lee was one of the people who were vocal about how San Francisco in particular was deteriorating in regards to the rise in crime and just the way of life in San Francisco. And he actually decided to take his family and move to Miami, which is funny because if the goal is to raise your family in a safe city, I don't know if Miami would be my first choice for the safest places to raise your children. It probably wouldn't even be in my top 5, to be honest with you. But again, that's his choice. That's where he decided to go. But he was in San Francisco on a business trip. He was meeting contacts and also seeing friends. And he decided to extend his trip by a couple of days. And it was in those couple of days that he was murdered. And apparently it happened sometime between 2 a.m. and he was found at 2:35, lying in front of a swanky luxury apartment building in San Francisco. So apparently TMZ got a hold of the surveillance video in that area, and it pretty much shows Bob Lee's final moments where he's trying to run into the street to look for help, and he stops a car, and that car decides not to offer any assistance, and they drive off. And Bob is seen stumbling, going all over the place. He falls down. He's fumbling with his phone. He gets back up, and then he collapses. Again, it's if you're a family member or if you're someone who knew the guy, then I can see how it could be heartbreaking. But to someone who doesn't have any connection to the guy, and you look at it, if you didn't know any better, you'd think to yourself, well, what's going on here? Was he injured? Was he stabbed? Is he on some type of drugs? What is the current situation? Because it does look kind of odd. But apparently, Bob did call 911, and the police and the paramedics or the first responders came afterwards, and they tried to resuscitate him, but apparently he died on the scene. Now, here's the thing. Because this is something that I wanted to discuss many months ago in regards to what has happened in the San Francisco and the Bay Area. Because ever since the tech industry, Silicon Valley and everywhere else in that area, came to fruition and blew up. This is probably in the early 2000s. It displaced a lot of people because what happened is that like Google, you had Apple, and many other tech businesses that were in the Bay Area, they started to hire all of these software developers, coders, and all types of managers that and pretty much jobs that pay an exorbitant amount of salary. And when those people came, of course, they needed places to stay. So a lot of them bought up the different real estate within San Francisco and the surrounding areas. They bought all the swanky places, and when you have all these tech people there with a lot of money, they're able to outbid certain people and definitely had more money than the locals. And pretty much they made it to where people who were renting in the San Francisco area, they found themselves displaced because they could no longer afford the rent because the rent was jacked up. A lot of people decided to sell their houses and kick their tenants out. So you had a lot of issues that were going on based on this new economy that was happening in the Bay Area, and people were forced out. A lot of people call it gentrification. You know, when the Starbucks comes, that's pretty much a sign of what's coming next. And this is pretty much what's happened. But here's the thing: when you're a person who's lived in the Bay Area for as long as you have, more than likely the Bay Area is not a place where you're going to leave and go somewhere else. You're going to find a way to remain in the Bay Area by hook or by crook. And because this is in California, where the weather is better than other places, there's no snow, that's not that cold, then this is where you have the rise in homelessness. It's not just people who are crazy on the streets, who are drug abusers and drug users. These are people who are working and functional homeless people. And there's been many articles and exposés about the housing issue within San Francisco and how people are being displaced and people can no longer afford to remain in the city. So you could see what comes out of these changes in the environment when you have people who are being paid an exorbitant amount of salary and they're flooding into this area and the property value increases by so much. It's going to produce crime for the people who need to get ahead and stay afloat. And this is why you have the rise in crime in those areas. And it's not just, again, akin to San Francisco. It is happening all across, not just different American cities, but also in Canada as well, too, where you find that places that are facing gentrification or that there's a displacement of the people who are, I guess you could say, native to that area. Whenever there's some type of a shift, there's going to be crime that happens because there's people who are looking to remain in that area because that's where they were raised, that's where their kids go to school. But unfortunately, they don't have a property there, so therefore they're renters. And then once the rent increases to a point where they can no longer afford it, sometimes they have to commit crimes in order to maintain paying the rent. And these are the things that causes the increase in crime. And this is where you have kids who are either mugging or breaking into cars or doing carjackings or doing hacking and scamming. And this is where all these things come out of this, because it's all about trying to stay afloat in the rising cost of living. So a lot of what people like Elon Musk and also Bob Lee was very vocal about, they actually had a hand in it. Now, not them in particular, but their industry and the tech economy played a part in that. So I think that that shouldn't go unnoticed in the situation. And this is a very unfortunate situation. And also one thing I want to say in regards to this is that a lot of times when people earn a lot of money or they are worth a lot of money, you normally see them seclude themselves from the quote-unquote common folk. You normally see them separate and isolate themselves where they're unseen. The reason why a lot of people who are wealthy, they don't look it. It's not because they don't have a great fashion sense. It's not because they're cheap. It's because they don't want to draw attention to themselves, where they can end up in a situation where they're either mugged, they're attacked, or they're robbed, or they're kidnapped. So they do that to remain inconspicuous because they don't want to have a target on their backs. So what we're going to find with this incident is going to really motivate people who have a lot of money to isolate themselves and seclude themselves, and also to make sure that they segregate themselves from the rest of the population. And this is where you're going to have more gated communities, or people who have money and the wealth separating themselves from the people who don't have anything or are struggling to get by, or the vanishing middle class, right? So I'm really seeing where they're going to create more of a division between the different classes of society. Instead of coming together and thinking about a solution that's favorable for everybody, they're just going to isolate each other even more. And that's where I see this going. Again, I don't want to be a pessimist about this, but when it comes to crime, rich people hate crime. Rich people want to stay far away from crime. And rich people have built bridges. They've built gates. They've built different blocks and roadblocks to prevent others from getting into their spaces and territories so that they feel safe. So I don't see this changing. I see this getting even more ridiculous in regards to the type of things that rich people do to make sure that they feel safe and that their wealth is safe and that they keep themselves away from the quote unquote common folk. Now, the last thing I want to say in regards to this is, do we even know how or why Bob Lee was killed? We don't. We don't know. We don't know if it was somebody that knew him, someone who had a vendetta or a grudge with Bob Lee. We don't know what his true reason was for leaving San Francisco to go to Miami, right? Did he have some type of conflict in San Francisco and he decided to flee? We don't know, but these are the things that the police force has to take a look into. It can't just be, well, it seems to be a crazy guy or a crazy homeless person who may have did this, because again, Bob Lee, according to the timeline of this happened in the wee hours in the morning, and Bob Lee was out on an extended trip, being where he probably shouldn't have been for a guy his age and for a guy of his stature and standing, being a father of two and being a husband. So these are the things that they have to look into. I'm pretty sure there's more to this story. I think it could be more of somebody that he probably knew and not just a random stranger who decided to mug him and decided to kill him, because if that was the case, they probably would have taken things from him, like his cell phone, which if you see in the video, he had on him, right? So again, that's my take. You let me know how you feel about this. Do you agree or disagree? You can leave in the comment section. You can share all that good stuff. But until next time, next move, best move, part of my presence YouTube channel. Peace.